Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Tech Leaders Hub Fintech, episode number 6, the first episode in 2022. So happy to have you with us here today. And joining me today is Chris Hares, CTO of Yoello. Chris, how are you doing today?
Yeah, very good. Yeah, hi Jacob. Happy New Year to everyone, first of all.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know how
Happy
long you
New
keep on
Year.
saying that. How long do you keep on saying Happy New Year? Is it
It's just the 11th. It's still fine.
still fresh?
And since it's the first session of the new year, it's totally appropriate for right
Yeah.
now. So yeah, Happy New Year, watchers and listeners, especially those who are joining us, as this is streaming live, because you might be watching this or listening to this like 6 months from now, and this might not be super relevant. But anyway, for the ones watching or listening live, if you could tell us that you can see us and you can hear us actually, and everything is working on the technical level, please let us know. Because that will influence the quality of our session today, obviously, and also the quality of the subsequent recording. So let us know, leave a comment. We should be coming to you live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter at this point. So use any of those channels to let us know. Meanwhile, Chris, I wanted to ask you, as people are still kind of joining in, not everybody's on time, who do you hope will be tuning into this session? Who do you think will benefit from the conversation? We've kind of laid out a plan beforehand last year, actually. So who do you hope will be tuning in?
Yeah, I think, from my point of view, anybody that's a tech leader, certainly around the two topics of hiring and agile development, has an interest in either of those two, wants to hopefully just learn something about how I approach both subjects. Maybe also people that are currently looking to progress their career in the future, maybe into leadership or up to a CTO role, and could find anything on the two subjects, that could benefit them either now or later, really. So, yeah, anyone that's got an interest in tech hiring and recruitment, and potentially a bit of an insight into what CTO role, could be for them as well. So.
Yeah, I thought that would be very interesting to get into as well. And I would say from some of the conversation we had before we went live, even if you're not a technical leader, but you're just generally hiring this year, some of this might be relevant for you.
Yeah,
Steph
yeah.
Tommen is sorry, just to highlight our comment here. Steph is saying all fine on LinkedIn. Very happy about that. It is the channel that we care about the most usually for these things. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, double kudos to you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can switch over to LinkedIn. Never mind. But anyway, seems like it's all fine on the technical level, and we can start delivering the valuable content that you have come to expect from Tech Leaders Hub, dear watchers and listeners. So, as is tradition, we want to start by already saying something valuable, something that you can take home and use at your own companies and your own operations. So, Chris, the traditional question of Tech Leaders Hub is, what is your number one tip for tech leaders?
Yeah, great question. I know that you sent me to this in advance, and I had to think about what it was. So for me, having sort of joined Yoello about 6 months ago, and working with some great individuals within the business, it's trust your team. I think it's all too commonly overlooked by people joining a business, certainly in a senior role, that a team is a fantastic asset to you as a leader, and trust them. As you come into a business, there's an expectation that you're the expert. But I recognize that within businesses, I'm not the expert at everything. That the team is far better at a set of skills that they work on every day than I am. So for me to trust them, I think is vitally important for them to be successful. It can be quite difficult sometimes to sort of step back and trust a team when you're ultimately responsible. But I think if you've got that confidence, and you've got a great team, then ultimately you're only going to be successful by trusting them.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And it's said a lot, I think. So, what I would like to ask you, Chris, is do any particular moments or particular situations come to your mind where leaders are especially tempted to maybe take the wheel a little bit more? And, those moments would be particularly important to actually end up trusting your team. Does anything come to mind that's like specifically, watchers and listeners, next time they encounter this situation, they should say, okay, I should trust my team instead?
Yeah, yes, it's a great question, and actually one that always comes to mind is timescales, and probably around tech is estimating. So
Hmm.
there's a responsibility on anyone leading a team to be the one that coordinates and ultimately communicates any timescales to the wider business, whether it's a CTO level or whether it's, at a engineering head level. Now, you always have a feeling, what an estimate should be, and that's great, experience and insight to understand how long something's going to take to build. But at the end of the day, that again, when you're trusting a team, you've got to trust that they are, coming up with estimates that ultimately they feel confident in. And it can be quite dangerous as well if you don't believe them or trust them, because ultimately you can lose their buy-in, because they feel that what they've given you is a very accurate representation on how long something's going to take to build. And if you go and overrule them and say, no, that can be done in half the time, maybe you're right. Maybe there's situations where you've got a great idea that can make something very efficient, but you've got to take them along that journey as well. You've got to convince them that it can be done in half the time, because ultimately they're going to be the guys that are doing the delivery, and they're going to be the ones that are producing the output. So you have to make sure that everyone is fully committed to delivering against those timescales. So in summary, that's the one I see the most is around sort of estimating, and where there's always a bit of a friction between leadership and the team, but it's back to trust again, in my view.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent example. I do feel the kind of the temptation that I mentioned here, that actually, no, it won't take you that much time. But you're right, overruling is not the right way to go here. Even if you do have a different idea, it's more about having a conversation. It's more about kind of showing rather than just saying, no, the estimation should be X. I wanted to mention a few more comments coming in. Very grateful for them. Agnieszka on YouTube is saying all fine on YouTube. Thank you both. Now we have 2 channels verified, which is very good. And a LinkedIn user is saying, looking forward to this one. I have it on good authority that the anonymous LinkedIn user is Andy Beacock. And I'm so happy to see you here again, Andy, for Tech Leaders Hub. Previous guest to recommend the session heartily. Andy's from Canopy. So by all means, check that one out as well. All right. Speaking of guests and kind of their background, I did want to first of all thank you for this answer. I think it's a very nice to add to the catalog of #1 tech tips, of which we have like over a dozen now from Tech Leaders Hub. But for the people who don't know you tuning in, maybe a little bit of background would be in order in terms of you're CTO of Yoello. So what does that mean? What does Yoello do? And how did you end up here? Briefly, I think, so that people know what experience you're drawing from as we delve into the topic of this session.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jacob. So CTO of Yoello. So Yoello is a payments company, mobile payments company. We primarily focus around hospitality and what they refer to as order and pay. Been a fantastic opportunity for the business over the last few years around certainly a lot of countries having restrictions around travel, and certainly around how people go out and visit bars and restaurants and having to pay at the table. There was already a move in sort of Asia for doing sort of very sort of mobile-based payments in places like cafes and restaurants, and also in markets, in food markets, around using technology to pay for goods. And certainly in the UK, we've seen a massive rise in sort of contactless technology for payment, and the sort of demise of cash-based transactions. So Yoello has really benefited from that technology, that push by the marketplace, and in some ways the sort of the changes and the challenges from the pandemic in terms of the way that people spend their money. So for us, that's our primary goal, is to help businesses and consumers and deliver mobile-based technology. The role at Yoello is one that's I guess a very sort of classic sort of CTO role. I have ultimate responsibility for all the technology pieces that happen within the business. That's primarily as a software products company around software product delivery, but also does include the other aspects of the sort of day-to-day life from sort of IT and some of the other sort of business type services as well that we need to do that fall into the sort of operational parts of how we deliver our software solution. Great to really sort of give how I got there. I started out as a sort of graduate software engineer. over 30 years ago. I get the sort of marvel from some people that I started working before the internet was invented. So some people think that was many hundreds of years ago, but unfortunately not. It was only about 30 years ago. So graduated. I've moved up through different roles in different businesses. I've been a sort of graduate software engineer. I've been a software engineer, an architect, and then into management. But started out my career building full-scale flight simulators. And
Oh.
had a great sort of opportunity and challenge there to build in that sort of mixture of hardware and software, technology. But after that, mainly worked in data, and it was a very sort of easy transition. Software flight simulators are very high performant and work on very low spec hardware, embedded type devices, and
Mhm.
certainly data and data analytics when it was in its infancy in the early 90s was a similar type of technology. The hardware was quite limited, data was still reasonably well sized, and
Yeah.
analyzing that data using both sort of traditional methods, but what we now refer to as artificial intelligence and machine learning was very similar to what we had been doing, or what I've been doing historically in flight simulators. So yeah, spent a
Mhm.
lot of my time in those two industries, and then recently in the middle of last year joined Yoello as CTO.
Okay. So I got actually two short follow-up questions to that. One is because in the end, you're a CTO and you're within fintech. So on the one hand, you made the decision to go more the management route. On the other, you made the decision to go more into this fintech payments space. So I wanted to ask about the motivation behind both. Let's start from the top then. So what made you want to transition from being just this engineer working on the code directly to this management track?
Yeah, and yeah, it's a great question again. And the thing I really like, and the thing I love about being a CTO, is the diversity of the role. And I really had an interest as I was moving into architectural positions. I had an interest on not just the software development, but also how commercial you need to be, even in a CTO role. You need to understand the
Mhm.
finances, even if it's just basic finances around what you pay for software licensing, and these days what you pay for cloud services, but also how you build software, and the cost of building software, and also the aspects of what is the cost of maintaining software. So my interest grew on some of the additional parts of being in the software industry, just outside of the actual software development side itself. At the end of the day, my sort of heart is in technology, and I still do develop software, and the sort of CTO type criteria, or the sort of job spec is the things that really allow me to do more from very much a sort of commercial aspect. The payments
Mhm.
is a really interesting question as well, actually, because I started actually working in payments when I worked in telecoms about 10 years ago, and we were very much using the telecoms network as a payments network at the time. And clearly, obviously companies have also gone the same route in terms of Apple and Google with the embedded technology in their devices. But when I worked in mobile telecoms, we were looking at payments, and it was nowhere near as mature and sophisticated as it is now. But
Yeah.
we were doing some research into that market, and again, something that really interested me. So when the opportunity for Yoello came up, it just seemed like a perfect fit.
Okay, yeah, I get that. And then what I find most interesting about Yoel, just from my own kind of simple understanding of the concept, is we had this conversation previously where in my mind you're kind of killing the concept of getting another round at a pub, because when you can order at the table, right, using an app, you don't actually have to delegate one person to get like 4 pints of beer. Everybody can get their own, right?
Yeah, it's fantastic how you look at some of the sort of social sides of what has been, a very well understood process, and something that people have done, very naturally for hundreds of years. And
Yeah,
you're absolutely right. There's a sort of logistics about it. Certainly, pre-pandemic or pre-technology, somebody would go to a bar and they would order the drinks, and they would do that because it was the most efficient thing to do. Why
yeah,
would five people go and order drinks at a bar and then five people come back with their drinks? You used to nominate someone, and again, you'd have a
yeah,
round, wouldn't you? All five of you would take turns. But
yeah.
what the pandemic has shown is I guess two things really. Is one is you can buy a drink, for yourself, and that drink gets delivered to your table. But also you can do it at your own speed as well. You don't have to wait for someone in a round. You don't have to, sit there and go off yourself, and sort of break that round structure.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does show that people, will behave differently, when given technology. And for us, it's been a real eye opener in terms of how people behave, especially when certain countries like the UK go in and out of a lockdown. You sort of see there's both things operating at the same time, and how people behave when they've got the choice ultimately on some occasions, whether they stay at the table or whether they go to the bar. And everyone that we've spoken to just loves carrying on the conversation at the table and not having that sort of hassle of having to get up and go to the bar and get some drinks and then come back again, or even just sort of fighting through a crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if one of us had to get up to grab something and the conversation is just getting started.
Exactly.
Exactly. All right. So speaking of us getting started, I think some of the watchers and listeners might be curious about the topic of the session. Let's kind of segue right into that then. And let's start talking about hiring. Of course, if you have any additional comments about Chris's background, about Yoello, feel free to shoot them in the comments. I'm sure Chris will be happy to answer. But for now, we did promise to talk a little bit about hiring. We did say, in the title of the session, that you're focusing on the wrong things when hiring. So let's try and kind of unveil what that actually means. So, Chris, what do you see tech leaders usually doing wrong in terms of hiring? What are the wrong things that tech leaders are focusing on?
Yeah, so something I've noticed, and maybe through having been in the industry a long time, and again, probably a really good sort of segue back to my own career, is that when I started out, and I was looking for a role, and certainly when I started doing recruitment myself in my early sort of leadership positions, the internet wasn't that well established, and agencies or recruiters that were looking to hire people, that they were doing it in a very traditional way. They were going out and speaking to candidates, and they were getting CVs sent to them, and they were reviewing those CVs, and they were understanding a lot more about the candidates before they put them forward for a position. And
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen really change over the last few years is that recruitment has become a search-based activity rather than a skills-based activity. And by that I mean that if people are searching CVs for skills, very much like you would search a Google web page for a particular piece of content. So what is happening now in the market is people are putting skills on a CV, even though they may not necessarily have spent much time or any time working with those skills, but it gets their CV up for visibility because it comes back as a search result. Rather than actually looking for what the individual necessarily has got in terms of experience, and I guess a broader set of skills. And having been an engineer myself, I recognize that tech skills, certainly for high quality engineers, can be quite easy to learn. Okay, you need to have the background and you need to have spent some time in that particular technology, but really good engineers can learn technology very quickly, and that's how new technology develops anyway in the market. When someone releases a new software development language, or when someone releases a new library, then engineers have to go off and learn that. And in the process of recruitment, I think it's about looking at the candidates for what their overall skills are like, rather than just their tech skills are. But I think as a consequence of recruitment being done by search rather than by those those skill identifications, it means that I think tech leaders are missing out on some really good talent because they're not coming back in the searches, or their way of presenting the data maybe isn't as clever or accurate to what the search is being done. So I think it's really skewed the market, and I can see whenever I do recruitment, the CVs I get back, they match all the skills perfectly because someone's done a search and said, has this person got Python? Has this person got AWS? Has this person got C#? And if they put the words Python, AWS, and C# on their CV, no matter whether they're near or far from each other, of course they're coming back on a search and they're probably most likely getting put forward for me to review. But
Yeah.
someone that maybe has got two of those, or someone that maybe hasn't necessarily presented it in the right way, may not necessarily come back on that search and is being missed, as an opportunity to be a great hire.
Yeah, so that's sounding to me like recruitment has become a little bit more superficial, and it's all about the labels that you put on yourself as a candidate and that you search for as an employer. And yeah, it's exactly right. I do have that feeling that, like career SEO is a thing, if I can call it that,
Yeah,
or
perfect phrase. Yeah.
yeah. So it's like you have to optimize yourself for the search engine, for example, the LinkedIn search engine. And if you put, from my perspective, right, if you put marketing there but not content, somebody looking for like a content role might not pick you up, even though you're a great marketer and you can get into content easily. So I get all of that, and I do see how that can lead to a limited talent pool, let's say. But I do wonder, because it sounds like it's a little bit of an industry standard right now. There's so many people to kind of search through, that using, for example, LinkedIn and searching by these certain phrases, it makes sense on like a an initial intuitive level. What is the alternative then? Instead of this keyword based hiring, what can you do instead to find that hidden talent?
Yeah, I think I think you have to look, at parallel examples,
Mhm.
as the way I've been thinking about it. So if you take something like YouTube, for example, again, you would search YouTube on phrases, but that doesn't necessarily bring you back the best content. Yeah, it just happens to be stuff that's met, the criteria of the search. But I guess
Mhm.
what platforms, like Google actually do is that they then rank it for you, and I guess typically a lot of the ranking is around how many people have viewed or reacted to that content, to give you a better idea of whether someone's video that matches exactly the same search criteria is worth viewing over somebody else's. So I think, to take your point that you have to sort of optimize your CV, sort of SEO, for recruitment, is I think that it may end up being that recruitment does become a very search based activity, but people's, I hate to use the word likes, but I think it will make sense. People's likes for someone's skills promote
Mhm.
them up the sort of, the search ranking, because if an individual is very good at something and they're recognized for being very good at it, then that will hopefully promote them to be a far better success rate in terms of coming back on that search near the top. Because you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. If you start searching for skills, you're going to get tens of thousands of people that hit those skills, and the best person could be 10,001, and the first person could be not the ideal candidate for you. So if given the fact recruitment's probably in a transition now where it's using search but not getting the right results, then if the search is the way forward, then there needs to be a better way of ranking the results, so the best candidates or the most suitable candidates for you come back nearer the top.
Right. So it's not just about, finding the profiles where Python is mentioned, but also I'm trying to think of a parallel, my thinking is still around LinkedIn, of a parallel between these YouTube likes and what on LinkedIn could be kind of measured as, endorsements of a certain skill. I feel like that's still like a mechanism on LinkedIn. But do you actually end up looking at that and using that, or have you found other ways?
Yeah, I have, but again, having sort of trying to put some thought of it, and I know that we spoke before about having this as a topic for this session, and putting a bit more thought into it. Having sort of worked in neural networks before, I wonder if there's an area around sort of neural network, or sort of the equivalent of social networking, that allows a candidate to get a higher prominence in a search result, because ultimately, and if you take fintech as a good example, what we're looking for is not only candidates that have got those skills, but have got them in a fintech environment. So that's when
Hmm.
you're starting to build a network of not only skills but industries that become both equally important when you're recruiting. And I guess your relationship, and probably LinkedIn is a great example where the data is available, either through people showing endorsements for skills, or recommendations, but also having a network with other people in similar industries, is a way of actually getting the candidates to appear, closer to the top of your results. So
Yeah.
having tried to put some thought into, how you could automate, the better candidates coming out in the search, I think it is basically trying to put down what is your sort of, human approach to recruitment, which is not only a skills, but what you've done in what industries and to what depth. I think
Hmm.
it can be automated, but at the minute I just think it's too crude. And some of the better candidates that I've interviewed and some of the better candidates that I've actually taken on and actually been successful are the ones that probably haven't been the first back on a search. But they have been the best candidates. It just happens to be that the very crude matching that's happening currently is not picking them to the top.
Hmm. So was there anything in particular that you did to kind of identify these better candidates that you ended up taking on?
Yeah, so in a minute, I think it's very much a sort of, because it's in a transition. It's very much a sort of hybrid approach where I think you have
Yeah.
to, as a leader, as a tech leader, you've got to really guide who's doing your recruitment, with some
Uh-huh.
criteria. So not just saying to them you want these skills, but actually, giving them more information, to go and enhance that search in effect, in terms of industries, in terms of what length of experience you need, and also what additional skills beyond just the tech skills, the sort of softer
Hmm.
skills that you need as well. So my advice to anybody recruiting is worth spending the time really defining what those criteria are, because again, if it's a search, the more detail you put into the search, then the better results you're going to get. So think about that when you're doing it. Think, okay, I'm not giving this job profile to someone that's going to look at it and really try and explore the ideal candidate. They're most likely to use a search system. So try and give them as many sort of search criteria touch points to make that search better for you, because work within the system in that regard.
Yeah. I can find some parallels between what you're saying now and some of the recruitment that I've done in the past. Again, marketing example, but to keep it very brief. What I could say, and we do have the support of our wonderful recruitment department at STX Next, and what I could tell them is, look for people with great English and great writing skills. And those are certainly two labels that a lot of people have on their profile, right? But what ends up happening really is that, again, you can have English on your profile and it can be a high level of English, but we require a very high, native like level of English. So what I ended up saying instead is, uh, look for people who probably studied English, maybe English majors, dig into a little bit more into their background. So either they're English majors, or if you see in their work history that they spent 10 years working in the UK, that's probably the type of person that will be a much more valid candidate for us, even if they didn't have like a marketing job. That sheer experience will probably make it a better fit, and it does lead to better results down the line. I think you need to have like a few existing examples within your team to then look at them and say, okay, this is probably why this person worked out as a candidate, so these are the features that we should now look for in further candidates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I was going to say, actually, I've got a bit of a secret skill that I use that anybody watching this will probably accelerate their their CV into a role that I'm recruiting. Is I really look at the CV and the quality and the eye for detail, because to me,
Ah.
if you're a software engineer, the eye for detail is really important. I've come up, like I began my career in aviation, and in aviation, I'm sure as everyone listening to this would appreciate, you don't want someone to make a mistake. If you're flying at 35,000 feet, a software engineer having a bad day is not what you want. So you put a level of trust in the software engineers building aviation software. So because my career started in that industry, an eye for detail was absolutely essential, because you can't get it wrong. People's lives are in your hands in effect. So
Exactly.
I always look at CVs and look for the quality of the presentation of the CV, because I think it shows someone that's got a really good eye for detail. If someone's got the sort of classic spelling errors, or even just the sort of grammar, and also the layout as well, in terms of consistent fonts, and that sort of thing. I think it's a great indication to the person about, first of all, how much attention they've given those sort of things, but also how they've concentrated on having an eye for detail. And even though I wouldn't reject a candidate for using 3 fonts on a CV or missing a full stop somewhere, it does really carry, for me personally, and I think because I think software engineers, is a vital part of the role to be that good eye for detail. I take a lot of extra merit on that whenever I review a CV, because it shows to me that they've got those skills, and they can be someone that can be trusted to have that eye for detail when they write code as well as their CV.
Yeah, it brings to my mind this quote, which I will not attribute because I am terrible at remembering who said what in terms of quotes. But there was this one that went, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So looking at how a person approached their CV, their attention to detail, that can tell you how they'll approach other aspects of their job. So does that mean, just out of curiosity here, does that mean that you would be a proponent of recruitment tasks and also measuring, attention to detail in that way?
Yes, yeah. I think it's really important, like you say. I think it carries across in someone's approach to anything. If someone's willing to hand over a CV that they haven't checked, then how can you be confident they're going to check the code before they hand it to a QA team, or to a committing it to a CI/CD process? So I think it's really important, how people approach it, both in terms of the way they work, and also I think it's how recruitment approaches it as well. So
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm wondering, watchers and listeners, if you have any additional questions about this topic of hiring, by all means, shoot them our way to, steer us in the direction of what you would specifically like to know. Because I think we got actually a lot of actionable tips thus far about the recruitment aspect of it all. And I did want to dig into the kind of other topics that we kind of promised to touch upon, like the areas a CTO should focus on, etc. So I'll ask one last question. In this area of hiring, you mentioned, some secret tips that will accelerate tech leaders' work, and help them achieve results faster. Any other secret tips before we move on? Anything else that kind of comes to your mind?
I don't think so. Maybe one that I also use is keep a really good record of who you've spoken to. I think we were chatting about how sort of remembering who you sort of spoken to and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important that when you sort of speak to someone, you show the courtesy of knowing that you've spoken to them before. It's like I had an example in my career where I interviewed someone 10 years apart. And there was a couple of businesses in between that 10 years, but I'd remembered that I interviewed them 10 years before, and it's it's quite surprising how that really carries a lot of weight to people when you show the sort of credibility that you've remembered them, and that you don't just treat that conversation as a very sort of throwaway thing. So I think it's worth keeping really good records on who you've recruited, even within the business, because I think if someone comes back in maybe for a later role or for a different role in a business, to show that you understood that they've already pre-applied and that you've spoken to them before, just shows that you're an excellent manager and organization in terms of keeping those sort of records and remembering them.
Yeah, that is an excellent point, Chris. You're actually reminding me to follow up with some of the people in my network that I haven't reached out to for some time. And it applies, like you said, to a lot, right? Okay, current employees is one, but people you've had recruitment processes with where you didn't have a role that would be a fit. Now there might be something, or even people who have since left the company, and who knows what may happen in the future. At STX Next, we've had a lot of people actually come back to the company in a different role, in a different time, different circumstances. It's all happened before. So yes, that is something that really shows that your company cares. You as a leader care, and that is what people crave, for their career, to have somebody and an organization that actually gives a damn, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I think to follow that up, at the end of the day, you may have spoken to 100, 200 people, but they've only spoken to you. They've spoken to you once, so
exactly,
it's a lot easier for them to remember that one conversation than it is you to remember those many hundreds of conversations. But technology is there to help you. You can, if you've got a record, then hopefully that can just trigger your memory on who they were and when you spoke to them. And just looking at them blankly as if you've never seen them before, I just think is not as powerful as showing that courtesy to know that.
Exactly. Yeah, that is exactly right. We have a comment coming in. So before we move on to the rest of our agenda, comments come first. Steph is asking, and thank you for staying with us, Steph. You previously let us know that everything is fine in terms of audio and video. Steph is asking, how do you promote diversity in tech teams? So I wonder how you would address that one, Chris.
Yeah, I've always never really looked at diversity, because I think if you look at diversity, you can be then diverse. So I've always recruited the best people for the best jobs, and I think there is an important aspect that you make sure that when you recruit and when you advertise, that you do that in a way that gets the biggest sort of pool of people, so that you're not just concentrating on one set of individuals that could lead to diversity. But whenever I recruit, it's all about the candidate. I typically don't start by looking at the details of the candidate, as in their name and their location. I always start with their skills. In some ways, I maybe another little secret tip, I go from the bottom up, because I think the bottom's the best place to start from a CV sometimes, because it gives you a chronological order in which they've done things. Obviously, because they normally typically put things in reverse order. But actually, maybe another secret tip, I'm giving them all away here, but I think it's really important to look at people's hobbies and interests as well. I think the work-life balance is really important, and some people being very passionate about their hobbies and interests, I think is really good as well. So that's the reason also why I tend to sort of go from the bottom of a CV, because I think people tend to put those sort of bits at the bottom, and I think it not only does it give you a really good idea of who the person is, but also just gives you some confidence that that they do have a really great work-life balance. So hopefully that answers Steph's question, in the sense that I just try to be diverse by nature, rather than trying to do anything very dedicated about it.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the hobbies too, because sometimes our experience is not just our professional career. And I've had an experience recently where I was talking with a candidate, and we were talking about leadership qualities, and he mentioned something that really stuck with me, in the sense of that his CV, his professional CV might not show that he's had leadership roles. But for example, he's a frontman of a band that's been successful for many years, and putting out stuff, having gigs and all of that. And I thought, yeah, and it's actually a very valid answer. And it does show that you're dedicated, driven, you can get people motivated, all of the good qualities of a great leader. And by the way, Chris, Steph is saying that it does answer her question, as she's saying. Thanks.
Thank you, Steph.
All right, great. Great. So what I wanted to kind of continue on to, as we again remember, this conversation we're having is just a pretext to have Chris here and to answer your questions, watchers and listeners. Don't be shy. Ask about anything that is on your mind that you'd like to know from fintech CTOs such as Chris. I do want to ask about being a fintech CTO, actually. Again, we've been doing Tech Leaders Hub Fintech for a while now. This is the 6th session. What I'm really trying to do here is, for CTOs or technical managers, technical executives, specifically in this space, to find something, some, again, secret tips or tactics or particular, strategies that will help them address the specific challenges of fintech. So what are the challenges that you found being a tech leader in fintech? And is there anything in particular that you did that helped you, address a specific challenge in a certain way?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's probably unique to fintech. Certainly the challenges at Yoello in terms of fintech is we're now going through a recruitment round. We just started the new year. Like a lot of businesses, we're looking to expand out the team that we have at Yoello. So certainly the sort of challenges that a lot of businesses are facing, including sort of fintech, is around getting staff, certainly in quite a buoyant market at the minute. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. I think, again, back to my point about recruitment, if you find really good individuals, then hopefully they can pick up the skills they need to do the role because they've got the basic skills and the basic aptitude to develop really high quality software. So having a background in sort of fintech isn't a necessity for us. Clearly, it's a massive help back to the recruitment point, because it really just shows that they've worked in the industry. So yeah, for us, a big thing is recruitment at the minute and expanding the team, and really as well, like I guess like a lot of CTOs, it's around sort of wrestling with such a diverse set of technology that's available on the market these days. One of the things I've noticed over my career is, when I started out, there was only probably a handful of languages that you could develop software in, because the sort of diverse set of platforms that we've got now just wasn't there at the time. You were either building something in C or C++, or really you were working in some of the sort of languages that people have heard about in sort of very old dusty documentations like COBOL. Whereas now the sort of language choice, the software development language choice available to people moving into the industry is massively diverse, and lots of organizations like Google, Amazon, Facebook or Meta are pushing some of their own technologies as well. So that as a consequence means that if you look for those technologies as the only ones you're willing to recruit against, again as a sort of CTO challenge, then you are operating in a very limited pool of skill sets, really. So finding great people that can sort of reskill themselves is something that needs to be considered with such a moving landscape on technology. But certainly from a sort of CTO point of view, and also I think with sort of cloud technologies as well, there's a real big move to the likes of AWS or Google's cloud in terms of, or even Microsoft's in terms of a technology stack. That those sort of skills are really important as well, because they can be very sort of dedicated to their own sort of way of working.
Yeah, I get that. And to me, it sounds like the market has become much more fragmented, and it's another weakness of keyword-based search and keyword-based hiring in that sense, right? Previously, you could search just for these few programming languages that were prominent, and maybe that helped you capture most of the market. But now, even if you focus on a few languages at a time, you're missing this whole other part of the market that might still be viable for you, because you've got talented engineers that might actually have dabbled in another language, but they could go full time with it. And that's they dabble to the point where they don't even put it on their CV, right? But it's there if you ask about it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, it's a real sort of overlap between the two subjects in that regard, isn't it? Is that if someone hasn't got the confidence to put it on their CV because they don't want to be contacted every 5 minutes for a job in that area, but has the proficiency to be able to do it, and is someone that could be of interest to a business because they've got some other skills. Maybe they've done a lot of work in AWS, maybe they've got a background in artificial intelligence or fintech. Then that I think it really just emphasizes the point I said earlier about when you're working with agencies that are doing recruitment, give them as much information as possible that helps them spread that search out. If you're somebody that's involved in data, you would use ands and ors. I want that and that or that, and you'd ultimately make a very complex query to find what data you wanted. So why not use the same approach when you do recruitment, by making your query quite complicated, but show what things are important and what things you're quite flexible on.
You mentioned data, and that brings an additional question to my mind, something that you kind of teased in our previous conversation. I keep referring back to it because we do try to kind of explore what we can talk to you, dear watchers and listeners, about during Tech Leaders Hub. I did make a note that you're using data, for better hiring and for greater team velocity. I was wondering if you could maybe say a little bit more about that in terms of, okay, yeah, hiring is one thing, and we've covered that, I think, extensively. For team velocity, though, because this is, I think, a really important metric, in your job. What data are you actually using to actually increase that?
Yeah, so one of the things I've done over my sort of recent career in leadership roles, and probably having come from a data background, is capture data. I think one of the first things they teach you when you're doing sort of data and data analytics is, you need the data. So
Mhm.
capture as much data as you can, because you don't ever know, or you don't necessarily know at the time which data points are going to be important to you, especially when you start to do some exploration of that data. The more data points you've got in terms of width of data, in terms of number of things you're capturing, but also the depth, so how often you're capturing it, you'll be surprised on how that can become very valuable to you. So organizations do this as part of their daily business in terms of how they track customers and product sales. But I think, and where I've sort of drawn it across to being a sort of tech leader is doing it within the actual business itself. So you mentioned sort of hiring. I think I touched on one of the sort of secret tips before about keeping a record of who you've spoken to.
Yeah, yeah,
Again, that's
yeah.
data, and you're using that data to search. Certainly in agile development, one of the things that I do is really look at team velocity, and velocity can be down to really how you're tackling or achieving tasks, but also how the team is spending its time across its week on or sprint on delivering
Mhm.
tasks. So I've always been a big advocate of sort of timesheets, or time tracking, which I know there's probably a lot of faces being pulled around the stream now to that, because it's typically got a bad reputation within the sort of tech or the software community, because historically it was probably used for very negative reasons. But I use that data for very positive reasons, in terms of seeing, what tasks are typically very easy to deliver, what tasks are very difficult to deliver. And by easy and
Mhm.
difficult, I mean not only the speed at which they're delivered, but also, how accurate the estimates have been. So example, if we're working in one particular area of the software, do we always find that we take twice as long? And you won't
Uh-huh.
know that unless you capture the data and are able to look at that data to see where those sort of standout metrics come from. But also as well, for me, capturing data certainly around sort of daily activities and timesheeting is really important, because I'm not going to say to people, oh look, you've only been developing for 30 hours this week. I'm going to try and sort of find out why. Where was the other time going? Am I making them go to too many meetings? Are they are they spending too long doing something because it's too inefficient? And again, you're not going to know that unless you've got the data to have a look at afterwards, and really pick
Yeah.
through and find out where the trends are. So so I think data can be very useful in an agile environment, in terms of
Yeah.
seeing how your sprints and your releases are working, but also from a tech leader point of view as well. You can see how your team spending its time. Not, I always say to the teams I work with, I'm not looking at an individual level. I'm not looking at how one particular developer performs on one particular day on one particular task. I'm looking at the bigger picture here. I'm trying to
Yeah,
find
yeah.
out what we do well in terms of output, and what we don't do too well. So in a very agile and lean way, look at how we can improve that, and how we can have a retrospective to find out why is that the way it is. So back to
Mhm.
my example, if we're spending twice as long than we think doing something, then is that just what it is, and we just make sure that we double it in the future? Or is it because there's some particular problem that we need to look into or address?
Yeah, I think that would be. I mean, you've got me sold on the idea, certainly, that you're looking at the various areas of your work, and if there's a particular area where estimations are always quite off base, then that is something to look at. That is something to analyze. I would love to follow up on this, but we've got a comment coming in, and comments come first again. So this one is a little bit long. Let me just read it out first. Adam is asking, related to our previous conversation about people kind of changing a little bit what they do to fit a new position. So he's asking, how do you rate people who want to change their profession? For example, from automation and robotics programming to object-oriented programming. So do you have experience with a lot of such examples? What would you say?
Yeah, I think it probably picks out what we discussed. It. So it's a great question by Adam. What we discussed earlier around why I start at the bottom of CVs and people's hobbies and interests. I think if someone has a real interest to move into a different area, and potentially I call it a hobby, but it's probably something that is done in addition to your sort of very standard sort of work day. But if someone's looking into a different area because they have a real interest in that, then why not promote that on a CV? In this current era, it will therefore come up on a search, and it will therefore resonate to anyone that's doing recruitment. So for me personally, I've got a real passion interest in sort of health and technology. So I'm involved with Garmin on their development platform for their wrist-based sort of heart rate and activity monitors, and I do a lot of work with that. And as a consequence, I put that sort of stuff on my CV, and I know that it does resonate with a lot of people when they speak to me. Maybe it's just a conversational point. Maybe it leads to some potential opportunity in the future. But I think if you've got an interest in something, then why not shout about it, and hopefully
Yeah.
that will give you the opportunity to make that career change.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about, if you never make it known about you, people can connect with you based on that, particular thing, that piece of information about you, or something that you spend your time doing. So, Adam, I hope that answers your question. If you've got a follow up, by all means, shoot it our way. I wanted to segue into something a little bit different, as we've got like 9 minutes left in the session. And again, the time just flies. I want to leave a little bit of time for your announcements at the end as well, because you might want to talk about what's happening at Yoello and how people can get involved. But you did mention something within our previous conversation about the 3 areas that you need to be good at as CTO. And I'm thinking, if I'm watching this as somebody who wants to be a CTO or is a CTO, I want to know these areas. I want to have them noted down. I want to rate myself in those areas, and I want to see what I can do to improve in those areas. So let's dig into that. So first of all, what are the 3 areas that you need to be good at as CTO, in your opinion?
Yeah, again, it's something that I've spotted, having been a CTO, and certainly I've sort of seen from chatting to other CTOs. I think there's can be a misunderstanding about what a CTO role is, and that's probably just due to the fact that a lot of organizations use the title. But certainly, from my career and having worked with some fantastic CTOs previously in my career, I think there's 3 criteria that in sort of obvious order, or less, to less obvious at the end. Obviously, the most important thing as a CTO, you need to be sort of technically competent or astute, and I think that comes either from having a background in technology or having a career in technology. So I think being involved in technology is clearly what's important. I think that one of the things that to pick up on that, though, is I don't think you have to be, and probably can't be, or shouldn't be, an expert at all technologies, because I think picking up our conversation from a minute ago, Jacob, if if you're good at all those technologies, then that's going to be sort of impossible, because they're just changing so fast. So you need to have
Mhm.
an understanding of technology, but not necessarily be an expert at technology. So that's the first one. Clearly, the second one is leadership, because a CTO position, that you have the sort of ultimate responsibility for the technology within a business. So that as the business grows, will be will be the leadership. It will be the leadership of people, and the leadership of technology, and probably the leadership of delivery and process that sits around that as well. So it's not just just the leadership of people. There's more to leading than just the sort of the management point of view. So you've got technology, you've got leadership. I think the one that I think surprises a lot of people is, I think you need to be very commercially aware. Like, I think when you get
Mhm.
to a senior level in an organization, there's an expectation that you are operating very efficiently from a commercial point of view. And that's from an obvious team size point of view, because obviously a team is going to be your biggest cost within any sort of software or technology business. But also, I think it's the things I mentioned earlier to do with sort of contracts and sort of licensing, and especially in the current environment, a lot of the cloud-based services is really having a handle on what the commerciality of those are. And if you sort of overlap all of it together, it's about bringing it together to build high quality software products, very quickly, or to market as quickly as possible. And that's where the three pillars of the sort of technology, the leadership, and the commerciality come together.
Yeah, so there you go, watchers and listeners. These are the three pillars kind of unveiled before you if you were curious about that from the description. And obviously, I have follow-ups. So let's start in the reverse order then, because for technology, I think a lot of technical leaders are focusing on that. Leadership, again, it's in the name. But this commercial area, if I were to ask like a final question or close to final, I would ask, how do you catch up on that area? Because what I'm seeing is, as you're progressing, you probably start with the technology area, then you get, gather up some leadership skills, you accumulate that, and then it turns out that you also need to be kind of commercially, maybe not fluent in those, but at least kind of aware and be able to navigate that. So, are there any particular, Chris's super secret tips for that?
Probably not. I think it is around probably experience, to be honest, and I think it's experience in both good and and bad ways, or by success and failure. Because I think as lots of people would say, and there's probably some very good books on it, that failure isn't failure really. It's just learning towards success. So I think if you end up either having the experience because you built something that took too long and therefore cost too much, or you've taken on a commercial license that is very expensive and you can't get out of very easily, then you end up picking that up, I think, just mainly through experience. There's clearly lots of things you can learn around that. You can learn, obviously, by looking at your sort of senior individuals in the business and how they behave and how they operate, and see how they make commercial decisions if it's something you want to sort of move into. But I guess probably the most secret sort of tip is just be aware of it, because I think a lot of people don't have the awareness and therefore don't tend to show any interest in it. And then when they move into senior positions and they find that someone comes up to them and says, "Oh, look, I've got a bill here for £10,000. What's this for?" Then it catches them by surprise. Or they say, "I've just looked at your head count and you're burning X million dollars per month. What are we getting for this money?" And then it's when you start looking at those things after the fact that's when it can become probably much more of a concern. So having the awareness is my secret tip.
Yeah, that certainly tracks. And I do kind of resonate with some of what you said in terms of sometimes you just have to learn a painful lesson.
Yeah.
By
or learn
overspending
from
or
others.
missing something.
Yeah, learn from others. Yeah.
And learn from others. Yeah, preferably from the mistakes of others, but obviously
Yes.
the ones that we make stick the most, don't they?
Yes, yeah, probably, yeah, and much more sort of helpful to improve yourself going forward. But yeah, I guess self-improvement, that's probably another one is look at what you could do better, and be very reflective and positive about your mistakes, and don't dwell on them, but see where you can gain value and make a difference next time.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we're almost at the 1 hour mark. I am tempted to ask one additional question if you have the time.
Far
All
away.
right. So that's good. That's going to be the final one. Just final check if there's anything in the comments, but I don't think so. Okay, just for my own curiosity then. I asked about the commercial area. I would also not want to let you leave here without touching upon the leadership area. It's, arguably it's the most important part of being in a C-level position. Do you have anything that could help the watchers and listeners kind of advance within that? Anything, that, again, particular resources, particular strategies, other than, trust your team, which we covered, that in the leadership area might help them advance faster?
Yeah, I think it is watch what you feel are good leaders, because if you feel they're a good leader, then they are, because you're the best judge of a leader, having a boss. So yeah, look at the behaviors of who you report into, and look for what you think works really well, and doesn't work very well, and obviously concentrate on the things that work well. So yeah, that would be my top tip, is learn by being someone that has a leader from your particular leader, not what they just do well, but also what you think they can do better.
Yeah, exactly. From my experience, sometimes when I'm in this position that I'm reporting to somebody, I see them do something that I'm not particularly happy with. Maybe when I find myself in the reverse position, I kind of get a fresh perspective on it, in the sense of, oh, I see now why they did it in a certain way. I wasn't happy with it as a subordinate, but I do see the benefits of it now as a manager, that there is a, another side to it. But definitely, putting yourself in the position of the other party can help you do better as a leader. Is how I would summarize that. Anyway.
Right.
The 1 hour mark is upon us, Chris. Again, it went really fast. Thank you so much. And we'll be wrapping up. Thank you, watchers and listeners, for joining us today. Before you go, please stay with us as Chris shares his announcements about Yoello. Do you have anything that you'd like to announce in terms of open positions, any particular pieces of news?
Yes, certainly. At Yoello, we're growing. We're growing not only as a business, but as a team. So we have got some active posts available for us now within the tech team. So please have a look at those. That they're about to be put onto LinkedIn very soon. We're just getting the job specs confirmed and advertised on that platform. So please reach out if there's anything of any interest to you. But certainly at Yoello, we're growing very much in terms of the payment space, and certainly around the hospitality and the order and pay side. So anybody that's got any interest, certainly from a sort of strategic or sort of white label point of view, we'd be very keen to work with those organizations and hopefully provide the value of the Yoello platform to their business as well.
Yeah. And also, if you're applying to Yoello, from what I've heard, make sure you check your CV for typos and make sure that it reads well from the bottom too.
Yeah, the hobbies and interests.
Exactly. All right, and just if I could grab a minute here, some people might not know about STX Next, and they might be meeting us for the first time. So as for us, we're the largest Python software development company in Europe. Hi, thanks for kind of discovering our brand for the first time. We've been building software products for clients all over the world, that includes the UK, since 2005. And we can help you build your product too, if you're interested. No matter your stage of development, we can help you from the initial discovery phase through design and development, all the way to deployment. So if you need support in any of those software development projects, reach out to us. Don't hesitate, stxnext.com. And if you like Tech Leaders Hub and you like more of this, for more sessions like this one, with top industry experts like Chris here, the best way to get more Tech Leaders Hub is to follow STX Next, particularly on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or you can go to techleadershub.com to subscribe to our newsletter, and you will also get informed about our sessions, also about our content in terms of articles. A lot of the articles on our blog are actually based on Tech Leaders Hub sessions, but deeper, and they allow you to kind of learn more about what we discussed during these sessions. So this session here will also be featured on our blog in the near future. And that's it from me. That's it from us, probably. Chris, thank you so much for finding the time to be a guest on Tech Leaders Hub. And I wanted to thank all of the watchers and listeners for attending and helping us kick off 2022 with a very, very nice Tech Leaders Hub session. Anything else to add before we go offline?
No, thank you, Jacob. Yeah, been a pleasure.
Yeah, it certainly has. All right. So thank you, everyone, once again. I could say thanks like a dozen more times. I'm so happy to be doing this with you today. Have done this with you today now. I'm going to click the button now and see you next time.